Distinguished delegates, allow me to introduce our keynote speaker, Professor Leonard of Princeton University. Professor Leonard is the James Madison Professor of Political Economy and Professor of Politics and International Affairs at Princeton University, and is also Associated Faculty in Economics. A scholar with wide-ranging interests, Professor Leonard has made substantive and methodological contributions across these fields. He is the recipient of the 2023 Global Economy Prize awarded by Kiel Institute for World Economy. Most recently, he was appointed by the Secretary General as a member of the high-level expert group on Beyond GDP. I am deeply honored to welcome him as our keynote speaker. I encourage all delegations to engage with Professor Leonard following his presentation and to take advantage of this valuable opportunity to exchange views on issues of great relevance to the work of this committee. It is now my pleasure to invite Professor Leonard to deliver his keynote address. Professor, you have the floor.
Okay. So first, thanks so much for the opportunity. It's such an honor to be here and to deliver the keynote address for this important committee. I will be speaking roughly for 15 minutes about innovation, collective agency, and development. And my speech will have I'll be making 3 points. The first one, I'm going to talk about the centrality of technological progress for development. And I'm going to later on discuss how the social infrastructure play an important role, not only in the design, but also the implementation of technology. And then the third point will be some recommendation, some policy recommendation to take advantage of technological progress. So first, everyone now agrees that technology drives growth. And the history of humanity took a drastic turn for the better with scientific discoveries in the 19th century to a point where you have this hockey stick relationship between technological progress and development. And recent research on growth accounting show that total factor productivity accounts for at least 50% of growth. And total factor productivity is the shorthand for technological capacity. So the technological capacity, more than capital and labor, contribute to more than half of variation in growth rate. What are the channels? There are at least 3 channels through this effect. One is productivity. Technological progress improve labor productivity in particular. Is also state capacity. Technological progress make the states more effective in delivering public goods. Also reinforce the organizational capacity of the states. It also have an important impact on society as a whole. For instance, I did a study in which I showed that the access to 3G technology reduced drastically food insecurity. Nothing else, but then the improvement in access, online access by itself, decrease food insecurity. But then the hard question is how this happened. And we need to focus on the mechanism through which technology generates growth. Crucially, focusing on what I will call collective agency and social cohesion. Machine and labs are run by people. So if technology is not people-centered, the potential gain might be skewed, even lost. For instance, there are recent research showing that automation led to a decline in wages. That was not the intended consequences, but this is what happened. Okay? So what is also important to understand is that, agency like build ownership, ensure not only adoption, but social inclusion, inclusiveness in particular, make the system work. For instance, recent studies show that economic progress in the U.S. South was limited because of racism, because of racial discrimination, because there are huge pool of talent that was neglected, isolated, marginalized because of racial discrimination and absence of social cohesion. So I'm going to give 3 examples of how this works. I'm going to start with Brazil, for instance. Brazil has made a huge progress in agricultural development recently due to a program called Embrapa, which is basically a research network that was decentralized, that was contextual, that was basically, make context relevant, and also a pipeline of scientists. So because of the distribution of Embrapa across the country, because of the local ownership of the program, it led to 110% improvement in productivity. China is a great example, particularly through what I would call entrepreneurial bureaucracies. So, the local governments, particularly state officials in China, are highly, highly educated. Many of them educated in sciences and technology. Same thing with South Korea. And what it does is gets the state officials being very innovative in the way they run government, but also they are well aligned with the innovation agenda of the private sector. So Ethiopia, for instance, to show the resilience of science and technology, Ethiopia has made huge progress in agricultural technology and also in space program at the height of war and military dictatorships. In fact, the program in Brazil was built even during the military dictatorship. So it just shows that science not only is a wonderful opportunity to growth, but it's also a wonderful opportunity to grow state capacity, regardless of the political turmoil the country might be going through. So on the basis of this, I'm going to make a number of recommendations. So far, the focus has been on basic schooling with very limited funding for research and development. A study by the UN DESA in 2025 shows that FDI represent only 1.4% of total ODI from 2019 to 2024. So 1.5%. I'm not going to tell you how much goes to consulting, So it just shows how little attention we paid to innovation, to technological progress, which is at the heart, which is the main driver of development. And, primary schooling and can lead to limited transformative effect in general, in global South, particularly in Africa, but it cannot lead to leapfrogging, which is badly needed for major improvement in well-being around the world. So it's really critical not only that we change the paradigm to shift the focus not just from basic education, but higher education. But higher education, we focus on research and development. So we need to turn our universities, our research centers, in places where frontier knowledge are being developed, not only in the hard sciences, but also in social sciences and humanities. And the second point is a point that I made to a meeting at the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development a couple of weeks ago. We need to go beyond the political conditionality for development, for investment and also for development aid to what I call the innovation conditionality. So, in fact, it's very similar to the current program in Europe called EU Horizon Europe. That makes innovation, technological adoption, a key conditions for investment. So, besides that, we need to go beyond this kind of paternalistic approach where we assume that technology should be simply imported, that countries in Africa in particular or global south don't have the capacity to absorb the new technologies and to develop true partnerships. You know, like I already gave the example of Brazil, Ethiopia, but, you know, if you look individually, for instance, there is a growing semiconductor industry in Kenya, driven by a local faculty at a local university. We have, if you take the African Council of Economics, the university that I set up, we are developing frontier knowledge in political economy to try to rethink how you design institutions, not only using data, but using insight from science. For instance, one of the areas where we are doing research is what we call institutional editing, which parallel genetic editing. So we think of countries as organizations, state and private organizations, as organisms that might be dysfunctional due to a particular aspect of it. You need to identify, to remove, or add something to correct it. So, we are also working, for instance, on using intergenerational network analysis to try to better understand social mobility. You know, we have data, we develop data from some African countries from 19th century until today to say how those societies have evolved. You know, what are the different critical juncture in the evolution of those societies using. So today with AI, with digital technology, you can actually, digital humanities in particular, you can use, you can actually more rigorously do this kind of analysis and get, those countries to have better knowledge of who they are, where they come from, so that they can make better decisions. So to conclude, I made 3 points. The first point is that technology is crucial. It's the main driver of progress. Someone says development is technology plus some noise, So everything else is secondary, But then it doesn't come in a vacuum. So we need to create the social infrastructure to be able to generate not only technological discoveries, but also adoption and implement it. And in that context, social cohesion, social infrastructure is very important. And then also a sense of agency, a sense of collective agency, people taking ownership of the future of their country. This is critical for not only technological adoption, but also the better implementation of growth policy. And then I finish by saying that we need to push foreign direct investment, public investment, with some degree of innovation conditionalities. We need to build more research hubs. We need to turn universities, not all of them at the same time, but at least many of them, into serious research hubs so that we can use higher education to drive technological adoption and also adaptation of foreign or technology that were adopted elsewhere in the domestic context. And also, and to finish, I mentioned the need to have organic relationships between sciences and humanities, particularly, engineering and science, but also social science. I use the example of my own work to illustrate that, and humanities, so that because one of what those countries need is use the new technology to better understand their history, their culture, so that they can make better decisions that are better informed by the context. I also mentioned the need to develop, to mobilize individual and collective agencies of, in those countries so that they can make the best decision for themselves. They can invest in their own future. Thank you very much.
I thank Professor Leonard for his interesting and thought-provoking statement. I now invite delegations to take advantage of the participation of our keynote speaker and engage in an interactive question and answer session. The floor is open, and I invite delegations to make comments or pose questions. Any delegation? No way, okay. I give the floor to Norway, the distinguished representative of Norway.
Thank you very much, Chairman, for giving me the floor. Good morning, colleagues, and thank you very much, Professor, for your insights into very complex issues. Now, just let me start by saying that it was a privilege for Norway to co-facilitate the Financing for Development outcome document, the Compromiso de Sevilla, provides a shared framework on how to catalyze investment, mobilize domestic resources, address debt vulnerabilities, and reform the international financial architecture. And what really matters now is how we use this and implement it, our commitments, in the UN, but also in the international finance institutions and at home, in our capitals and elsewhere. So your research on political institutions and economic development aligns very closely with the mandate of this second committee. And from Norway's perspective, it would be valuable to use your insights and explore how this can be translated into concrete actions. So I have listened to your arguments for technological capacity, social infrastructure, agency and ownership. But if I try to frame it a bit differently as a question, what would be the most impactful methods to ensure that financing flows to where it is most needed, and really then for the realization of the Sustainable Development Goals? Thank you, Professor.
I thank the permanent rep of Norway for your question, at the same time your comments. Professor, you have to give me to take a couple of them so that we can maximize the time that we have. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of France.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Chair. Infinite thanks also to our two speakers for these very interesting presentations and keynote. I have a question about the conditionality of innovation. I think this is a really fascinating subject in the area of innovation. What is the correct dosage or the proportion that should be used for applied research and fundamental research? And do you feel that this is a relevant distinction? Perhaps there is a more relevant one that we should be using. I'd be very interested in your views on this. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of France for your question. Without anyone requesting for the floor, I now give the floor to Professor Leonard to respond to the questions and comments. Thank you.
All right. So thank you very much, I think, for the questions. Okay, let me make 2 points. The first one is that we need to really put at the top, and I already said that, knowledge. I should say even knowledge before money. Because, I mean, we need to say that loudly. Not that money is not important. I mean, like Arthur Lewis, when we were Prize in economics, said that. You know, he said, you know, knowledge first. And I was on, I can tell you a story, you know, which is, you know, illustrate this very well. There is a top research center, not to be named, but that was functioning relatively well until a massive influx of money. Then the incentives shifted away from research to rent-seeking. And as a result, the quality of the research has declined. So why this is the case? Because the institutions of the research center were not aligned enough with research. The right people were not in charge. They were political appointees. So what I say, if we don't have the right infrastructure and we put in money, things not only will not improve, but they could get actually worse. And the innovation conditionality is also important because, for instance, if money flowing in a place and you say, we are not accepting 19th century methodology for agricultural production. We need precision agriculture. Where do you get it? Brazil. Where did you get it? Ethiopia. Where did you get it? US, and so on. You know, if you put that condition right from the start, you align the incentives properly. You know, and you know, so I think in a very concrete way, what I would suggest, the kind of institutional capacity that I think is needed is some level of decentralization of higher education and units, you know, because, you know, we need to depoliticize universities and research institutions. You know, and you do that, you can get situations like Brazil that I said, where even under the non-democratic regime, the place was extremely productive. You know, so one of the conditionality, for instance, beside the innovation conditionality, could be institutions that give enough autonomy, you know, enough decision-making power to scientists and to research organizations. You know, so that's, I mean, it's not, again, it's not impossible, you know, it has been done elsewhere. And you would have no, you have no idea the extent to which scientists are marginalized in development debates. You know, go to any conference, you know, there will be, you know, a large number of investors, you know, whatever, they will be sitting. And I say, where are the scientists? You know, I mean, people who will be doing the work to develop agriculture, who have the science, who have the knowledge, where are they? Where are they sitting? You know, so, and I think by being loud enough about this and by putting some institutional conditionality, by pushing very hard that progress comes from frontier knowledge, and we are not putting money unless there is some guarantee that there will be innovation. If we don't, if we put this in place I think progress will happen. Let me finish by also saying that, you know, it's now very clear that open societies, society with basic human rights, basic level of freedom, those societies grow much faster, you know. So I'm not very much into this idea that, you know, we need to sequence development into focusing first on economic development, and then when we are lucky, at some point in time, we are going to get freedom, democracy, and the rest. You know what I mean? No, this goes together, you know, and I think if growth happened, you know, people are happy, you know, I mean, they will not question, you know, they will not question the governance, they are not question and so on. So I think democracy, autonomy of research institutions, and conditionality, so that we are going to say we are investing, you know, private and public, but come on, we need to get people making the decision, people doing the work. We need to get them to be in charge, to be in power. And there are practical ways to do it. There are a lot of historical examples where this happens, you know, so I think that's what I would say, particularly on this front. Now, you know, I think the question about whether it's foundational and apply, I think the balance can be decided locally or regionally. You know, for instance, I can see a scenario where, you know, in one country, or, you know, some countries, for instance, in a region produce more physicists and mathematicians, and those produce more computer scientists and social scientists. You know, I mean, if you have regional cooperation on science and technology, you know, you are going to take advantage of the skills and knowledge from different sectors. You know, this is possible. So we shouldn't say, I mean, what we need to stay away from is the idea that poor places can only focus on applied stuff. You know, that, well, they have to do things that are practical, you know, and as a result, if they are lucky, at some point in time, they can think of more sophisticated stuff. You know, like I can see many problems today in Africa that can be solved by AI, but not AI generated in Iowa, but AI generated locally. You know, you know, like there are some of the security issues, for instance, to be blunt, some of the security issues, you know, on the continent beg for the use of AI, technology. You know, if you see Vietnam, South Korea, China, what they have accomplished on that, in that level, at that level, I think this knowledge can be, you know, translated, adapted. It might sound highly technical, it might sound, but it's, you know, the step between developing the algorithm and the application is not far, it's short, you know. And actually, in many countries in Africa, when resources are available, you see a lot of young scientists coming up with these solutions. You know, I mean, like if you take M-Pesa in Kenya, you know, it's a massive success. There is a study showing that it led to 2% decline in extreme poverty in Kenya. But then the issue here, can we take this knowledge to universities, to lab, so that they can be strengthened, improved? You see what I mean? So that progress on the technology can continue. You know, so I think, again, my short answer to the question is that this balance should be thought of domestically or regionally, but absolutely we need both, and it shouldn't be a matter of resources, because when you think about it, mathematics is actually cheap. You know, you don't need fancy labs to teach mathematics. It's a state of mind that can be taught. You know, like for instance, my country has a reputation of one of the poorest countries in Africa, but have a reputation of producing top mathematicians in Africa. But because there is a culture, you know, of embracing mathematics and studying mathematics, you know, and myself, before I became an economist, to show that you are worth anything, you have to try math first, you know. And then, I didn't fail in math, but still, it just shows you that there are places where hard sciences, physics and math are super, super, super strong. We need to take advantage of that instead of saying, you guys are not practical enough. You are not applied enough. You know, see what I mean? So both, you know, a combination of those are really important. And what I'm saying echo, Professor Abdul Salam, you know, from Pakistan, in the 80s, who was so driven to introduce and develop hard foundational science around the world, to a point where he set up one of the institutes in my home country, Benin. You know, and I have a friend. Sorry, I'm maybe speaking too much, but I could give you this example. So I have a friend of mine who is now like a chair professor in Toulouse and the U.S. He told me that, you know, in '89 or something, or maybe earlier, Abdul Salam, you know, who was based in UCL, came to give a speech in Brazzaville. You know, a very dirty kind of place, you know, university was at its infancy and stuff. He came to give a speech. And the idea that somebody at that level could go to Brazzaville and think that the net big thing in physics can come from that place was really amazing. Result, some of his colleagues, they went to France to get their degree, and then he is one of the top scientists in the world. You know, so it shows that even if the impact might not be immediate, the drive, the ambition, the aspiration that it brings can have big impact long term. So we shouldn't discourage basic science, we should encourage it. Obviously, we need to make sure that it's problem solving driven as well. Thank you.
I thank the professor. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of South Africa. You have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Professor. Very refreshing to hear a point of view that's different to what I've been used to in the 2.5 years I've been here in New York doing the second committee. But I'm understanding you to say that developing countries have agency, and it's something that we shouldn't discount. And that if we set up the right kind of infrastructures, we can address our development challenges. So I think that's a very important message, and I agree with you 100%. Now on this particular topic, I wanted to ask, since we here deal with the international aspects of things, are there any obstacles to technological diffusion that are international that we should look at addressing, in addition to the domestic factors that we need to concentrate on? Thank you very much.
I thank the distinguished representative of South Africa. Professor, you have the floor.
Thank you. So, yeah, I think that's, okay. Obstacle, yes. But, you know, I'm sure South Africa have seen worse times where nothing seemed possible until it became possible, you know. So the point I wanted to make here is that we need the scientists themselves to take their future in their own hands. You know, I've seen many of my colleagues who are very happy to take stipend from Western researchers, you know, like, for instance, turn themselves into, you know, give the key to the local knowledge to others. You know, like, for instance, okay, let me say something. 100, if you take 100 economics papers, only 5%, or only 5, I mean, top 10 journals in economics, only 5 have African co-authors. 5 out of 100, you know, and it's true to some degree in the hard sciences. I mean, for this to happen, some of us might have accepted this. Some of us may have said, well, give me money and I will just work for you. You know, instead of taking the leadership role and say, you know, if we want collaboration, we want partnership, we don't want extractive research, you know. Obviously, it will help if the international community, you know, put some conditionality. Like, for instance, if you want to run a research in Nigeria, for instance, you have to say, I'm not moving unless 50% of the researchers on this project are Nigerians. I mean, how difficult it is, but that's not what's happening, you know. And for instance, there are a lot of, I can give you many examples like this. So I think we need to sort of, okay, and then our own government, you know, like I'm not, like, for instance, you have, it's crazy. So, like, there are countries where they have top talent domestically or in the diaspora. And then they are ignored completely. You know, they are not engaged. They are not, you know, things that, you know, are not imaginable in places like South Korea or China or Vietnam and so on. What is possible in our places? You know, so what I'm saying, we need to sort of promote like representation of African scientists on research on Africa. And the researchers themselves have to take a leadership role and say, I'm not doing this, you know, and then the international community has to help as well. So that's very important. And then the other obstacle that I think is important is commercialization of research. I think that since finance is very, very important, so instead of, you know, if you have an idea, for instance, you develop a prototype on security, for instance, you know, using AI or something that you want to do. So, I mean, you go to some foundation, they are going to give you, I don't know, let's say 200K or 300K to develop it. Well, if you turn into a business, you turn into a prototype that can be sold domestically, internationally, even if you don't have a funding, you go to IFC. You are not talking 200K, you are talking $20 million, because it's a business, you know. So this mindset of commercializing research, I'm so sorry. This mindset of commercializing research and getting private sector involved heavily in commercializing research, working with universities, you see what I mean? Creating startups, innovation-driven startup, that will take care of some of the obstacles. So mindset, startups mentality, and international community helping to impose some norms in how research is conducted, with demanding representation of local scientists in any project that they are funding. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor. And that concludes our interactive discussion. And allow me once again to thank you, Professor, profoundly for your participation in our today's meeting. You have given us so much to ponder about. Delegates, we will briefly pause at this point to rearrange the podium for our next session. Thank you very much.